Hello and welcome into a brand new Patriots Hub podcast special rookie minicamp edition. Alex Barth joined by Evan Lazar of Patriots.com just after the Patriots had their first rookie minicamp practice down at Gillette Stadium this afternoon. First of a 3-day rookie minicamp. This was the lone day that was open to the media. So, Evan, we got our first look at the class of 2025 today. Your overall impression and the first look at a Mike Vrabel-led practice today as well, kind of along those lines. Not a full practice, obviously, just the rookies and a couple of veteran players out there. But your thoughts, big picture thought coming away from today.
That was my big picture thought, Alex, was watching Mike Vrabel, coach a football team. I got a little taste of it down in Tennessee when the Patriots and the Titans had joint practices. I don't know, was that 4 or 5 years ago now, probably? And you just got a little taste of it, but you weren't really watching Vrabel at those practices. You're, of course, watching the Patriots at those practices. So to see it up close and to see him working was really cool. It was the first time we got to see that. And it was something that there was a little bit of Belichick in there in terms of like the coaching off to the side and pulling guys out. And I mean, how many guys did he pull to the side throughout the day to coach them up on even like small details of, top of the route footwork with Lan Larison at one point, or CG Dupree, setting up his seam route on another. Like there was just so many different instances like that. And that attention to detail and ability to coach every single position on the roster is why everybody holds Mike Vrabel in such high regard.
Yeah, also had a good special teams chat with Hector Johnson. Was working with him quite a bit, the tryout player from Endicott, local product, during the special teams period. And he wasn't the only one. Like they went late in practice, the offense did a walkthrough. So there wasn't a ton of 11-man football, but this was kind of one of the rare periods where, they had 11 guys on offense. They didn't have a lot of players at this camp. So a few of the offensive guys that were kind of left filled in on defense, but then you had Vrabel and other coaches making up the defense. And Vrabel's back there as the middle linebacker, like making adjustments and pointing things out and helping guys line up. And other coaches got involved as well. At one point, they only had one running back there. Travion Henderson not present. We'll get to that. But, Larison was the only running back there. So at one point, Tony Dews took a handoff, the running backs coach. Yeah. I think it was quarterbacks coach Ashton Grant, right, who caught a pass in the flat. So Mike Vrabel very involved to the point, again, watching him there as the linebacker, he looked right at home. But it seems like he's kind of setting the tone for the other coaches to do this too. They're not just putting, ball boys out there as markers, essentially, as placeholders. They're doing it themselves.
Yeah. I mean, we were standing next to each other when Mike Vrabel bumped somebody on the defensive line out of the gap, right, to realign the defensive line, which you'll see every Sunday, with any NFL team. But it was so funny to watch the coach go out there and do that, and he was like, "Hey, you're in my gap, like, right, like you need to be in this gap." Like just that type of stuff, I think is great for everyone. And I know right now a lot of what we're saying and a lot of what we're seeing is the positives and the sunshines and the rainbows. And we'll see how this all actually manifests itself in the fall. But for right now, it's cool to see all the attention to detail and the level of focus and intensity that Vrabel brings to practice.
All right, let's get to the players. Will Campbell, first look at him. You saw, I guess you hadn't really seen him in person.
I've never seen him. Yeah.
We both left the combine before he spoke. He wasn't at the Senior Bowl. You didn't go to the Pro Day. So Will Campbell in person for the first time, your impressions?
Yeah. I mean, I was really impressed. I understand there's going to be more challenges ahead for him. I mean, bigger challenges certainly than what we saw out there today. Doug Marrone at one point was rushing over Will Campbell's edge. So that's where we're at a practice like this. And I think we're going to say it a million times throughout the course of this 30 minutes that it's rookie minicamp where they're not in pads and it's basically OTA tempo, right? Like this is not real football. And we're all aware of that. But similarly to like when you go to a pro day or the combine and you were to evaluate a lineman, you can see, how a lineman gets out of his stance, how explosive he is, on the move, how he's able to generate power and pop, coming out of his hands and jolt out of his hands. And I just thought that watching Will Campbell, even hitting pads and, hitting teammates holding those pads up and giving him a target, you could see his ability to really unlock his hips, roll his hips, generate contact through the ground up, and then finish with his hands. And there were a couple of times where he had his teammates on skates and he had to almost pull up, right, and not put those guys on the ground. So you see that raw power, that strength, that explosiveness. That's all good and exactly what you want to see. So I really I watched him hit blocking pads for more time than I would like to admit, and I was really enjoying it.
That's an underside. I was with you at that point. You were pretty giddy, but no, when he hit that pad, I mean that thud echoed in the bubble there, the way it really didn't with other players. And the other thing, look, this shouldn't be notable, but it is notable because of the pre-draft coverage. He was at left tackle. Will Campbell's at left tackle all day. And on Jared Wilson, Mike Vrabel did say there might be some cross-training down the road. But if you thought there was any question about where they're going to start him off and what their plan is for him, he's the left tackle.
Yeah, he was at left tackle the whole time. Did some kick out blocks, which is probably one of his best in the run game, I would say, in terms of what blocks he's really good at. And he was able to really, you could see it. You could see how those reps are going to translate into game film. And one of the things that a lot of people that you speak to about Will Campbell say is that he practices extremely hard, and he sets a really good tone on the practice field with how intense and how he takes every rep like a game rep. And this was rookie minicamp on May 9th. And I don't think you would know the difference from Will Campbell on May 9th to September 9th or December 9th or January 9th or whatever the case may be. So that was exciting to see. And I'm really, I've been excited about him since even before they drafted him, but everything that you hear and everything that you see with him, it really sort of cements that pick more and more. Now, he wasn't pass protecting very much against any sort of competition. We'll see what the length and all that stuff comes up in pass pro, but the run blocking, I think, is going to translate really nicely.
Yeah, the motor was there. They weren't really using whistles. The coaches were just kind of yelling whistle. And when Will Campbell was up, it was whistle, 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 like three or four times before he let up on the block. So far, so good from him. Again, like it's one non-padded practice.
Oh, yeah.
We're not sitting here telling you he's going to be a Hall of Famer, but certainly liked what you saw early on from him there. Just some of the other draft picks. I guess we can go in order here. TreVeyon Henderson. What did you make of TreVeyon Henderson not being at practice?
Yeah, I hate to speculate. We don't know, right? We have no idea why he wasn't at practice. It could be a million different things. Obviously the Patriots announced this afternoon that they signed 8 of their 11 draft picks. Will Campbell wasn't one of them. He was out there. TreVeyon Henderson wasn't one of them. He wasn't out there, right? So I don't know if it was contract related. That would be my initial instinct, but again, that's pure speculation, and who knows. But it is worth saying that in terms of negotiations for rookie contracts, first and second round picks have the most say and have the most bargaining power, let's call it, just based off of guaranteed money, cash flow, those types of things. Jaden Higgins got a fully guaranteed deal as a second round pick. And that I believe in Houston, right? Yeah, in Houston. Yeah. And that when those types of things happen, now all 31 guys that were drafted in the second round are going to want guaranteed deals. That's just the way that goes. So did Houston set a precedent there? Potentially. And maybe we'll see if that impacts TreVeyon Henderson.
So we'll see what happens there. And I wouldn't, whether it's him, Campbell, and I think Craig Woodson was the other one who didn't sign, right? I think Christian Barmore signed his rookie deal like the week before training camp. So they have time to get that all figured out. But he was the one player not there. Kyle Williams who is the second highest draft pick that was in attendance. Made some nice plays. I don't think he quite had the volume that some other guys did, but made a nice play coming back for a ball on a throw that was high up the sideline late in practice. There was another play. I thought he was open deep and the quarterback just didn't throw to him. The receivers didn't get a ton of help from the quarterbacks in this one, but I liked what I saw. Again, very minimal, but I liked what I saw from him.
Yeah, I mean, I was watching him pretty up close at one point, just going through the positional drills and the footwork. And we've seen a lot of receivers come through here at this point, and there aren't a ton of guys that got the rapid feet like he does. Like, you can definitely see the quickness and the foot fire ability, and just all around just having that ability to get through those drills really smoothly. So that's exciting. You mentioned the catch, towards the end of practice, that little comebacker that he ran where gets both feet down, catches the ball away from his frame. That was one of the things that they actually coached him up on, I thought, was just, you can see it on his college tape, and that's double catching the ball sometimes. He will have some issues there. He has some issues with drops last year at Washington State as well. So that remains a little bit of a work in progress. But in terms of the movement skills, there's absolutely a lot to be excited about with Kyle Williams. And Bob Douglas has a little bit of that too, but he was a 6th-round pick, right? It wasn't exactly the same sort of thing. I just think that his quickness and his overall fluidity as an athlete is not something that I necessarily saw early on with Tyquan or Jalen Polk or some of these other guys. And I know it's easy to just sit here and talk about guys that didn't live up to the draft status, all the way, but that's just all we can go off of. And I thought Kyle Williams, looks the part of the type of receiver. He's not big. We both talked about that a little bit as well during practice, but that's not what he was touted as, right? Like, no one was expecting him to come in here and look like he was Des Bryant. Like, this is the type of receiver that you drafted. So I was box checked, right? Like, he looked the part of what you thought you were going to get with him.
I'll say the other thing with him, and this is maybe just because there weren't that many players out there, and we'll see what it looks like, OTAs in a couple of weeks once the majority of the roster is there. But he spent a good amount of time with Josh McDaniels, kind of like you'd expect to see a quarterback around the offensive coordinator quite a bit. There were a few times, it wasn't the whole practice, but there were a few times because you're looking at where the coaches are, and I was like, all right, there's Josh McDaniels. Who's he talking to? Oh, it's Kyle Williams. So, the line stayed on their own pretty much the whole time. Travion Henderson wasn't out there. So if you talk about draft picks for like, Kyle Williams is kind of the top player that Josh McDaniels is looking at in a setting like this. Again, Will Campbell, Jared Wilson, the offensive line for 90% of practice were doing their own thing. They weren't with everybody else. So who's McDaniels working with? Travion Henderson's not out there. It is Kyle Williams. So maybe that's part of it. But those two were talking quite a bit. Let's talk about Jared Wilson. Like Will Campbell, some questions about where he might play. Does he have some left guard flexibility? Mike Vrabel said before practice they want him to learn left guard. Eventually, they want all the interior guys to know all 3 spots, but they don't want to overload him. So to start, he is working at center. Spent the majority of the day there. It does feel like that's where they want to develop him primarily, which I think speaks to something that we talked about on Catch 22 on Patriots.com this week, that he's going to push Garrett Bradbury for that starting job. And I don't think it's something that they're going to wait to maybe start that competition. If they feel Jared Wilson's ready, they're going to open that thing up.
Yeah, we talked to him too after practice, and you see a pretty mature kid. It seems like he's got a good head on his shoulders, and that's what you want out of the center. It's going to be a mentally taxing position. You got to be a pretty smart football player and be a pro. Willing to prepare, willing to watch film. All that kind of stuff to understand the fronts you're going to see, the pressure packages you're going to see. So there's a lot of that on that position as well that I think about in terms of a rookie, right? Is he going to be able to be ready to do all that kind of stuff right out of the gate? Physically, I thought that he pretty much looked like I expected, moved like I expected, good athlete, really wide bodied, which is something that I like about him in particular, especially if you're going to play on the interior. We talk a lot about wingspan and stuff like that with Will Campbell, but I don't know if it necessarily matters quite as much when you're out on an island, whereas when you're inside, you want to take up more space and you want to clog, more lanes and things like that at center, especially if you're not going to be covered. So I think that he's got the build of a center, looks the part of an athletic, center. And he talked about that a little bit, that he likes that. He likes getting out of his stance. He likes being uncovered so that he can just fly up to the second level or get out in front of outside zone or a toss play or something like that. And you can definitely use just schematically. There's a lot of cool stuff that you can do when you have a center that's a really good athlete. And I think that's what they're kind of going for here.
So any of the day 3 guys stand out to you? Like, it's tough. There's not much you can look at from the defense in this setting. If it doesn't seem like we're talking about defensive players, just when there's no contact, no pads, it's tough. It's mostly defense and special teams on day 3, but any of the day 3 picks stand out to you today?
No, not really. Like you said, it's hard to evaluate defensive players in a practice like this. I think you're more looking for movement skills and quickness and speed, and that tends to lend itself to the offensive side of the football. But I think all these guys, filled out the suit for me, at least to the most part. And I think when you look at the way they drafted, that was the expectation with most of these players. Not all of them are high draft picks. Some of them fell in the draft, like Swinson and Farmer a little bit. But there was never any questions about, their body types and were they NFL size and NFL power and NFL speed. And so it was good to see, those guys in uniform up close for the first time. And I think that there's still a long way to go before we start to evaluate defensive line. I know we just did 10 minutes on an offensive lineman, but he's a first round pick. So it's for good reason.
Well, I'll give you this, like Marcus Bryant is huge in a way that doesn't fully come across on tape. I mean, he's almost like comically big.
Yeah.
So
he's a big dude.
We'll see if they can round out his technique, but there were a couple guys like that. Like you see him in person, there were some UDFAs, which we'll get to, but you see him in person. It's like, oh, okay. Like even compared to the measurements, he's bigger than you'd expect him to be. So that was, that was something. All right. UDFAs. I know your answer to this because your jaw was on the floor for most of practice, Evan. Which UDFA stood out the most to you?
I really thought that Land Larison looked the part. Again, like I just said, fill out the suit. And I've just seen, and we've seen what it looks like to be a pass catching running back for a Josh McDaniels offense. Like there's a type to it, right? Like there's just a body type. There's a certain amount of quickness. And I just look at him and, especially at the first level, when he gets matched up on linebackers, whether it's like a foot race to the flat or, over the middle of the field on an option style route or something like that, he's just got that feel. He's got that type of quickness. He's got that type of movement skills. I mean, how many passes did he catch on checkdowns today? Just, getting out of the backfield, making himself available to the quarterback, took some coaching from the head coach there as well at the top of the route, technique and things like that. So I think they see it too. He's wearing 34. So it just like looks like Rex Burkhead, wearing Rex Burkhead's number. Again, it's, from our years on the beat, watching a James White, watching guys that do that and play that position at an extremely high level. You just kind of know when guys have the skill set that maybe lend themselves to playing in that role. And it just looks to me like Land Larison has that. Now, is he going to go on to be a star? Who knows, right? Like who knows what he's going to end up being, but that's how I just felt watching him, was like, yeah, this guy's got a chance to be like a quarterback's really good friend, coming out of the backfield as a security blanket in the flats and things like that.
One other thing on Larison that I just think lines up with what Vrabel's looking for, 100% on every route. A guy that was going hard on every route, and that's going to hold weight. So I thought he was probably the best of the UDFAs. I don't think he was the only one who stood out. Efton Chisholm got open a couple times. You see the subtleness in his route running is what really stands out. Like he can turn a small movement into separation because of, the way he uses it, the timing, the way he sets up the defensive back, whatever. And I mean, you see that a ton at Eastern Washington. It's nothing that's new, but you just see it in person. And then the other one was CJ Dupree, the tight end, another one of these guys that you see him in person, and it's like, okay, wow. Yeah, like he looks like a lineman, but he was moving pretty well. He got certainly some individual attention from Mike Vrabel. So those are kind of the three guys we talked about. Brock Lampy's in there as well as the fullback, and that's just, are they going to keep a fullback or not? But it's been Land Larison, Efton Chisholm, CJ Dupree, and all three of them, I think today, you saw why they kind of lead that UDFA class. They were clearly better, or clearly stood out more than some of their undrafted counterparts.
Dupree's just massive. Like he's just a big dude. And if he's going to make the roster, at least as a rookie, it's going to be tight end 3, blocking tight end, inline blocker specifically, special teams, those are going to be the roles for him, field goal protection and like things like that. Like that's right. that's his path to the roster. And like you said, he looks almost like an offensive lineman. Like he almost looks like a tackle, and he's just a big, tall, athletic guy. So we'll see if he has any sort of pass game upside. He didn't really get used much or get targeted much at Alabama. They didn't really feature him in their passing game. So I'm not sure you're necessarily going to get that out of him. But if you're just looking for a third blocking tight end, I think CJ Dupree certainly looks the part. We'll see what it looks like in camp, but that he just stood out to me immediately just because of his size. He's just a big dude.
But are you ready to put any of them on the roster? I know you were ready to vote for Lan Larison for Rookie of the Year at one point during that.
I had him on my all rookie minicamp first team, Lan Larison, which totally exists, right? Like that's totally a thing. And no, I just look, you told me to slow down and not overrate these types of practices.
Well, you said on Catch 22, and
I have a tendency
Kyle
to
Williams
do it
specifically, but you said on Catch 22 on Wednesday, you said Kyle Williams is going to go out there, no pads, and he's going to be fast and everybody and blah, blah, blah. And I'm not going to take the bait. In credit, you didn't take it with Kyle Williams. I thought that meant you were going to look at it through that lens and not just, okay, I'm going to do it with somebody else.
That's a very valid point, and you're probably right that I should not do it again. But we have a show to do today, and on the show today, I was just impressed by the guy. I just think he, like it keeps saying, there's just a way that those types of guys move that can separate in the passing game, on running back routes out of the backfield that he seems to have. Now, is he dynamic enough to separate from a starting linebacker in the NFL versus, UDFA rookies and things like that in a rookie minicamp? We'll find out. But you can't watch him and not see the fit in a Josh McDaniels offense. So I definitely thought that about Larison. He also played a ton today because they didn't have a lot of running backs. So that was a piece of it too. But I was excited by him. I was.
Not a UDFA, but so I thought this was interesting. They did have a couple veteran players out there. John Giles, the wide receiver, Sherman Jones, the linebacker, and Miles Battle, the defensive back. I don't think we saw any veterans out there last year. And I think there are pretty strict limitations on non-rookies being involved in this thing, but kind of like, the G League, sometimes you see second or third year players get out there in the NBA. John Giles is pretty involved. Yeah. John Giles was one of the highest volume targets. He is that bigger physical receiver. You saw it. He made a couple contested catches. When we talk about the wide receiver room, and they've moved on from some of these other guys, but outside of the non-Efton Chisholm UDFAs, when you run through that group, there's no veterans that get left off the list. When you're talking about, the guys battling for that last spot or two, Bourne, Booty, Polk, Baker, Giles is the only veteran that doesn't get talked about. And it is, in theory, a wide open competition for those last couple spots. It's one rookie minicamp practice. He's the adult out there with a bunch of kids, essentially. Do you put any stock into what John Giles did today? And do you think if he, can translate that to OTAs and minicamp and eventually training camp, is there a chance he could earn a spot on this roster?
I don't know if I put much stock on it in terms of the roster. It's just, as much as it's an open competition, there's also 4 or 5 guys that are probably pretty safely going to be here. Certainly 4 in my mind. So, is he going to be able to win a 5th spot? Is he going to make himself so important that they put 6 on the roster? Like, I don't know. But what I do look at with John Giles is like a really good practice squad player to have around, because he does have the traits of an NFL player. Like, he has the size, he has the speed. He seemed to make some really good catches today outside of his frame, some good adjustments and, more acrobatic type of catches. So even if it's just a practice squad scout team role for him moving forward, you could see on the scout team how he could emulate some, really good receivers around the league and give, the Patriots starters a good look at how that player is going to play on Sundays. So there's value in that too, right? Like, it's obviously not what he probably is aspiring to be, but hey, it's a paycheck in the NFL, right? So there's some value to that as well. And he might be right on that fringe of like almost like a 4A player where he's got NFL traits, NFL size, NFL speed, but it's just not quite there. to be on an NFL roster. And I think that he could stick around though for a while as that like fringe guy.
I also think, again, with that Vrabel mentality and what he's looking for, and maybe this isn't pushing for a roster spot, but just sticking around, the veterans are all off this weekend, right? They don't have, I'm sure some guys stuck around, but like they don't have to be in the building. They're, the team's in phase 2, but they're gone. And you stick around to practice with a bunch of rookies, which, some guys might say, why do I have to practice with the rookies, right? I've been in this league. Sticking around in Truman Jones and Miles battle too. I think that's just probably a good look for those guys.
Absolutely.
Anything else? Any other thoughts? Any other takeaways from today before we wrap it up? I will say, I know people are probably waiting for us to talk about Andres Borregales. He did not kick today. So he was just kind of out there walking around, working with Julian Ashby on the snap. So no special teams notes, but anything else today?
I know you got no punters out there, so no stopwatch for you. Yeah. You couldn't even, operation time. Like, I was waiting for that because, maybe they were going to do some field goal and you would have gotten like the snap to hold to kick, right. Operation time. I didn't even get that. I mean, I think it's worth mentioning the news about Terrell Williams and his situation. And he talked to the media this afternoon, which I thought was nice of him, cool of him to do that. And I think the good news is that he seems like he's in good spirits about it. And he said, I'm away from the team, but I'm not away from the team, right? Like I'm still involved and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully, fingers crossed, he's able to get back here and he's able to coach this upcoming season, but he wasn't coaching today at rookie minicamp. So I guess that's probably the only other notable thing.
Yeah, he raved about the way Mike Vrabel's handled it. And obviously people's minds, understandably, are going to go to Adrian Clem, who was the offensive line coach in 2023, got sick midway through the season. That was in season and never returned to the team and wasn't really replaced on the staff. Look, I don't know what the medical issue or anything is, and I'm not a doctor, but like Terrell Williams talked about, like, hopefully I'll be back in the facility soon. Like he seems to, for whatever it's worth, he seems to believe that he will be able to physically return. Like you said, he said, I'm away from the facility, but I'm not away from the team. Said he's talked to Vrabel every day, stayed in touch with the players on Zoom. So he's still doing his job as much as he can. But the fact he talked as much as he did about, hopefully getting back in the building and getting hands-on with the players and stuff like that, at the very least, he feels like he can do it. I personally, me just listening to it, no inside information, I heard that as kind of like the start of training camp.
Yeah.
Right. Because spring practices are done in a month. So, and then they're off for a while. So we'll see. But like, if they get him back for the start of training camp, I don't want to say it's insignificant because obviously he went through a significant health scare and it seemed like it really impacted his outlook on life. And he came away with this, very positive outlook, but I don't know how much it impacts the team if he's back for training camp. It seems like they're handling this the right way.
Yeah, and Zach Kerr, who's taking over right now as like the interim DC, if you want to call that, on May 9th. It's not like they're not calling any plays in any games anytime soon. But he was in Tennessee with Vrabel and Terrell Williams. Scott Booker was in Tennessee with the two of them as well, who's the safeties coach, and it's kind of seemed like he was more or less coaching the secondary a lot today as well. So there's just multiple guys that have been in this system and have coached under Vrabel and this defense before, that when we're in this stage of the offseason, we're in, day one install territory. Like they all understand the system inside and out to be installing what they're doing right now. So from that standpoint, the teaching standpoint, I don't think they're missing much. The last thing on Terrell Williams, when I talked to Mike Vrabel at the Senior Bowl all the way back in January, they had just announced the coordinator hires. And so I asked him about Terrell Williams, and the number one, the very first thing that he said was that Mike Vrabel is personally really big in investing in people, just developing people. And he said that Terrell Williams is one of those guys that he wants to develop, that he wants to invest in. And there's a lot of love between those two guys, right? Like there's a really strong bond and relationship between the two of them. And so I'm sure that they're figuring this out. I'm sure they'll have this figured out.
Well, for those of you tuned in live, that's 2,000 people on a Friday night listening to us talk about John
Nice.
Giles and backup defensive coordinators and stuff like that. So very much appreciate it.
Don't leave all rookie minicamp Lan Larison out of the conversation.
I figured he was above that, kind of like we're getting into the weeds thing. He's out of the weeds at this point, I would think, based on the way you were talking about him. But Lan Larison as well. Thanks to everybody who tuned in live. If you missed any of the show, you want to go back, Sports Hub YouTube page, also Patriots Hub podcast, wherever you get your podcast. For more coverage, we'll have more from OTAs going on, again, with the Patriots Hub podcast on the Sports Hub YouTube page and on 98.5thesportshub.com. You can check out Evan's recap on Patriots.com as well. Thanks for joining us, bud, for this one. I don't know that it was quite last year. You joined me after rookie minicamp practice, and it was, Drake May's first practice. It was one of our most viewed videos, I think, of the year. So I don't know that Lan Larison will get us quite the draw that Drake May did, but I appreciate you joining us nonetheless.
Hey, I got almost as much enjoyment watching Will Campbell against the blocking sled than I did watching Drake May throw against air. That's just me, though. We're nerds like that. Yeah. That's just us. But I would watch that all day too. So we're teach their own. But anytime.
So there you go. For Evan Lazar, I'm Alex Barth. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time.